Good afternoon, everybody. Halton here, and thank you for joining with us for the educational portion of the Rev Fire Group Apparatus Conference and Expo. We had a pretty amazing morning. I've got to tell you, like you, I love trucks, I love training. And we got to look at the HR 100 single axle Quint, and that had some really fascinating features. And it was great to have the guys there with the real gouge. You know, we got to ask some really good questions. They showed us some really amazing features. It was just a whole lot of fun. So, and then we got to look at this Emax rescue pumper that was equally as amazing. Had some really, really great, I think, applicable features for almost any community. So the whole thing was just really superb and well done. The videos were fantastic, and the questions were just perfect. They're just spot on. And I know it's available in the archives. So just go to the streaming thing there and you'll be able to see it. So this is just a cool event. And we're going to be doing this the next 5 Mondays in a row. We've got some incredible, next week it's Tony Carroll. We're going to be doing Mayday Mondays. So, you know, today we got Jonah Smith. We're going to be talking about the must-haves for the first arriving. So this kind of education is just perfect. It's what we do at FDIC. And it's so cool because just like at FDIC, then you pop down to the floor and you check out, hey, well, if I want to put this pump, and then, well, what if I want to do this with, you know, with these discharges? And you got the men and women right there that can give you the correct answers. And so, and also you got to check out some of the features on this site where you can see apparatus that's like been demoed apparatus that you can purchase. You can see all the apparatus they're going to be talking about. And tomorrow, there's going to be a whole nother section on 2 really incredible pieces of equipment. I know they're going to be doing a custom industrial pumper. Now, even if you don't have industrial responsibilities, you want to check that out because there's a lot of features on industrial pumps that we ought to be putting on our regular structural, pumps. Because I'm telling you, there's no reason not to. So you really want to catch that. And if you have industrial responsibilities, it's a must attend. So that's at 9 a.m. Chicago time. We're doing all this on Chicago time, which is cool, right? Living on Chicago time. And I'm in Tulsa, so I can say that without appropriating a song. So run afoul of the Twitter crowd. So anyway, really, really cool tomorrow. And they're also going to be talking about an air transportable ARF unit, which is important. You know, we're using ARF stuff for more and more things other than just aircraft. On aircraft, it's absolutely critical. And municipal airports are carrying more and more semi-commercial or what we call high fuel load aircraft. It's just more and more common. So anyway, you know, this is an amazing. Check out the agenda. Make sure, you know, you've got your schedule down. Look what's coming. It's just, God bless the folks at Rev for doing this. It's just amazing. And the production value is phenomenal. So I got my good buddy Jonah, and we were talking earlier. We were looking at some pictures of all our goofy friends from FDIC and our goofy friends from Jonah's hometown, and you know, wonks like you that just really want to stay focused. What Jonah's going to be talking to us today is near and dear to my heart. The first arriving is such an incredible responsibility, and the must-haves. What Jonah's done with this presentation and why I love it is he's really focused on a few critical issues that you need to be talking about all the time, not casually, but all the time. And when you're looking at different structures, you can take these must-have lessons that Jonah's going to give you and apply them over and over and over again. Now, you can ask a question anytime you want. You click on that little ask a question box. It'll get sent to me. And at the end of the presentation, Jonah and I will pull up the questions and we'll roll through them and we'll get to as many as we can. And it's going to be amazing. Jonah's a great guy. I know he's going to do a killer job. So without any further ado, my good friend Jonah Smith, take it away, little brother.
All right. Well, thank everybody for, first of all, thank Fire Engineering and Rev Group for the opportunity to do this. This is a whole new world for all of us, doing a whole online thing. But I think it's actually, we're having a discussion actually with Captain Dugan on the way back from Revolution this weekend about how I think it's brought more folks into training than we ever thought it could. You know, I'm sure of the, 100 or so attendees I see at this second, there's probably a firehouse watching with 3 or 4 people that might not have made it to FDIC or might not have made it here and there. So it's a different time. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me blab for a little bit. Thank you to Chief Halton for the opportunity and obviously all the people that are making this work. We were having a discussion prior to the webinar beginning of all the different things that go into this. It's not just me logging on and Chief Halton logging on. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background, and thank that group as well. So without further ado, we'll get started. All right. So, this is one of my favorite programs to present because it brings in a lot of pieces that I feel like are important on the fire ground and important in our careers. Additionally, it's a 4-hour class. So 1 hour of that, I'm not going to give you a quarter of the information. I'm going to give you a quarter of the time. So we have a lot of stuff to get through. So I'll try not to get hung up too much, but I know it'll happen, and I'll probably get the hook from Bobby or one of the other fire engineering crew to tell me to be quiet and move on because we got to get going. But I always like to start off. One of the problems in the fire service sometimes is instructors don't share where they get their information from. And I got an advanced degree and had to cite everything I ever learned. So APA style for those of you who might be in a degree program somewhere, but this is my bibliography. These are the folks who I really have leaned on in my career, both as an instructor, as a firefighter, and some of them even as a father. And you recognize a lot of those faces. I normally in my classroom go through all those faces, but you can see there's a lot of folks that a lot of y'all probably follow. A lot of the fire engineering crews there, Dave McGrail is one of the best people I have ever met because he was the one who turned my life into loving engine work and saying it was okay and speaking out loud with it. Before I took that class, I kind of was embarrassed because I wasn't a truckie and I'm not a rescue guy. So it's kind of like, well, I like this engine stuff, but I can't really talk about it because everybody thinks you're, just a speed bump in the hallway, those kind of things that generalize about engine work when there really is an art to it. And there's been a lot of folks, the Brian Brushes, Aaron Fields, the Laguerres that have made it kind of the cool thing again. And I got my roots up there in the top right with the guys in Richmond. Those folks taught me about the fire service, taught me about what it means to get a hard time around the firehouse. Grew up in different backgrounds than those folks. They wore me out about it. But when my dad passed away, they were the first people at his funeral putting flowers on the altar, helping my mom set up and helping me get through some of that and show me kind of what brotherhood really was in the fire service. So without further ado, we'll get started. Some of the things you got to think about when you're talking about being the first arriving company, which is typically an engine company, and it varies. In the course, we talk about what your department does in terms of command, who has command, where does it start, and having a discussion with some folks from other departments. Sometimes it's a truck officer, sometimes not. In my department and in my volunteer department, it's the first arriving engine officer typically because engines roll out first, and that gives us the positioning and some of the stuff we will address briefly, albeit briefly in this short presentation. But in order to establish what we have to do when we arrive, we have to know what we want. Do I want a line stretched? How quickly do we want it stretched? Those time-based things, everything we do is time-based. But a lot of times when we practice it, it's, we're going to go stretch a line. And, then training doesn't become meaningful. We have to make that training meaningful by setting time standards. And if your department doesn't have them, work towards that. If your department may never have them, work towards that as a company officer or as a tailboarder. Affect that change with the people on the back of your apparatus and say, hey, we're going to have a line stretched in less than 30 seconds if that's what your department decides. Typically 30 seconds to a minute, the first line should be on the ground with water showing out of it. And that varies with staffing and my background being in Charlotte is different than where I volunteer, where we have Saturday, for example, we had one person working. I get it. We don't have the staffing of Charlotte, and I literally live 10 minutes from the city limits. So I understand that. But some of these things have to be pre-established. I'm not saying you have to have, PDAs or predetermined assignments, but you have to have expectations on your company or in your department of what you want. Are you an aggressive search driven? Are you aggressive vent driven? Are you aggressive engine company culture? I feel like Charlotte, we're aggressive at all those things. And some departments, it's an educational issue of, if you show up with 2 people, you can't emphasize search over water, but sometimes you may have to if you have entrapment. We're so fluid in our environment. It's important to remember that knowing your culture and your department, I can't dictate what will work in Charlotte will work in Kalamazoo, Michigan. But they have to be consistent because, again, I say at every class I teach, we don't work with the brightest light bulbs, right? We have some really bright folks in the fire service, but then we have some people who they're not all there. And we can't build things that are so dynamic that I don't know, if 1, then 2, then 3 we need to be in a linear decision-making model for a lot of our folks because, let's face it, our career, like, hey, you're going to make me run into that burning building? Like, hold on. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We're not the smartest bunch sometimes. So we got to have consistency in our expectations, and then they have to be flexible when necessary. And we got to recognize understanding one another isn't done watching some hunting show. In the South, we watch hunting shows and fishing shows and, they whisper and, hey, there's the deer over there. that kind of stuff. And that's really cool. But we got to get to know one another on a family level, on a personal level, and a professional level to know, like, I'm good at stretching lines, but I'm not great at cutting holes. So if we got to cut a hole, like, and I say it all the time, we had a low angle rescue my volunteers, and I was in charge of anchors, and we had a subject matter expert in rescue stuff in our department walk up, and he said, "Hey, what do you need?" I said, "I need you to check my anchors." He said, "No, they look good." I was like, "I'm telling you, you need to check my anchors." Okay, I'm not the anchor guy. So understanding that happens on the drill field and sharing some of that. So what happens when we arrive? You know, everybody talks about when we arrive, all this happens. You got rescues, interference, meaning people in the way, cars in the way, police cars in the way, you know, cars not pulling out of the way, trains getting in the way of your second arriving, getting in the way of your primary route. You know, think about here recently, the civil unrest. How did that interfere with arriving to structure fires? Is the scene safe enough for us to go? There's so many things for that first arriving that we might not know, because the fire scene can be so dynamic, right? Needs are established. You know, hey, I need an aggressive search because mom met me at the front door and said my kid's in there that the dispatcher wasn't aware of. Other factors, meaning, can I throw a ladder here? Is the bush too tall here? You look at this picture, like, is the engine company placed in the perfect spot for a truck company positioning? Probably not. But if that's where it is, like, we don't move engines after they park, do we? We never do. That's the problem. So when it gets there, those factors are identified. The stretch, where are we stretching to? What are our stretch options? You know, I can say on this one, I'd stretch through that breezeway, but what if the breezeway was fully involved, but the backside wasn't? Like, we've got to think that way when we're talking about arriving first. Flow, are we going to go big line? Are we going to, you know, using some of Brian Brush's stuff? Are we, you know, exponential engine, a linear decision-making model, right? Room and contents, 1.75 inches. A building, 2.5, or excuse me, a floor of fire, 2.5. A building of fire, you know, we're going to use the deck gun or large, you know, portable monitors maybe. But some of those problems are identified. Like, do we have a water supply problem? Like, is the hydrant, did the stem break off when my hydrant person took it? Those are things that are identified when we arrive. We can plan all day for them, but until they happen, we don't necessarily get to put our plan in action. Okay, so one of the first things that happens, this gentleman here, if you don't know who he is, look him up, write it down. If you get nothing else out of this, study Andy Fredericks. He is, you know, the godfather of a lot of modern day engine stuff. Died 9/11, FDIC instructor all over the place, and a mentor to many of us even after his death. But one of the things he said was, when the garbage man turns the corner and sees garbage, he doesn't scream it's his job. I say all the time that fire departments put fire department, right? Fire department goes on the side of every apparatus, where you're fire rescue, you got, you know, a transport engine type thing. It still says fire rescue or fire department. That's a lot of money in gold leaf your chief spent. He could have saved on those 4 letters if fire didn't matter. Plus, there ain't but one fire department, right? The Charlotte Fire Department answers fires in the city of Charlotte. That's it. We don't have a backup. We don't have anybody else. I mean, we have the rescue, so they make everything better if you ask them. But we have the Charlotte Fire Department is the only fire department for the city of Charlotte. You've got to think that way about your department and understand that when they call the garbage man to pick up garbage or the fire department to go to a fire, we don't need to freak out. Like, that's what we're there for, right? So a couple things that I always say, 3 C's for communicating your size up: clear, concise, and calm. We all have people in our department that are radio novelists. Anybody who knows me knows I can talk. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's talking. The problem is, if we have a radio novelist and I have a pertinent emergency message to send out and you're yapping about the light wispy smoke coming out of the, 32.5 foot mark of the soffit, that doesn't help anybody when I'm out of water inside, or I'm having a stretch issue, or I found a victim. Okay. When we give those light wispy smoke coming from a 32 by 47.5 foot single family dwelling, have a command established 32 feet from the front door, that's great, but shut up, because that second engine may need to tell you the hydrant's dead, a car we've wrecked, somebody met me at the tailboard and said I have entrapment. You never know when that's going to happen, so get in the habit of keeping it clear, concise, and calm. The radio, a little bit of background on me, I'm a radio nerd. Radios are meant to transmit the spoken voice, not the yelled voice. They don't process the voice and the vocoder as well when you yell. And plus, when you yell, if you've ever been in an argument, especially if you're married, if you yell at your wife, she yells louder, you yell back, and then you go sleep on the couch. That's the way this works. Well, when you're at the fire ground, you got to think that way of, if I escalate the situation in my mind, I have escalated another, depending on your size of your apartment, another 7 trucks coming in. I've escalated that, and it's really, really bad to escalate the fire ground, right? So this is just an example of a fire I had. I like to use some personal stuff because I talk about what I do, but you know, if you've ever been to a class, you're like, that dude doesn't do that in real life. Well, I like to, you know, show my work, so to speak, but this is a fire we had. It was nothing showing. You see the picture there, and here's the audio from it.
Our company is responding to 1911 Sharon Oaks Lane. Got one call on this. Caller says she lives downstairs on the second floor. Her neighbor over at 308 has smoke coming in the vents in her bathroom. Apartment 307 has hot windows. They're knocking on the door. Nobody's coming. She's not sure if they're home.
And it sounds like it could be a job, right? But again, no fire showing or anything.
Engine company 20 is on the scene. Two-story multiple dwelling. Nothing's showing from side A. 20 Smith. Copy. Engine 20 on scene. Man alarm, smoke visible.
This was after we opened the door that was wide open, or
Copy upgrade. 16 got you close. 16, if you want to, back down in here if you can get it. Or let the ladder through, back down in here, come assist us. Ladder 16, give me a search. We're stretching now. Copy primary, ladder 16 on scene.
so if you noticed in that, one of the things that I really want to, you know, frame a reference for everybody, that porch you see the smoke coming off of, once we opened the door, saw the smoke, we immediately shut it back, controlled the door like we should. That fire had burned so well in the one room, it had melted all the trimming in the room. It also, when somebody tried to throw a ground ladder against one of the windows, he set it against the window, and the entire window frame, the casing came through the window, or through the hole, because it was so hot in that room. We were able to control it. And as I'm looking down, you heard me say, I tell you what, 16 back down in here. That was because I was watching the trucks. I was at a high point. You know, I'm on the Sentinel Tower looking down. I could see them coming in, and it was going to simplify things for the ladder. But those are the kind of things you got to get out there like, hey, it's a working, we got smoke visible, working fire, we're stretching. Get those clear commands out early, because if 16 pulls in front of the ladder, they're blocked out in that parking lot. And that's key when you're talking about a multiple dwelling, large house, and you get into the rural setting. If you screw up where you're going to put your dump tank right off the bat, like, it's not going to get fixed anytime soon, right? So good size up. A couple of these come from, you know, another FDIC instructor, Micah Kiger. It was the Meadowwood Court fire up in Loudoun County, Virginia. And some of the advice he gives, I think we've got to pass on. You know, stand far enough back that you can see the shingles. That way I get 100% view of the roof integrity, the ridge vent behavior in terms of, am I getting smoke out of the ridge vent? Because if I can't see the peak, I never see that. Walk, not run. So many of us want to go inside, right? We want to melt our helmet. We want to look cool. We don't want to be outside. But if you took the captain's test, your job is to be outside. If you took that assistant chief ranking at your department as a volunteer, like, it's not the time to be like, all right, I'm going to go steal the nozzle from the tailboarder. No, like, you need to be responsible for the safety of that fire ground. And part of that, and in establishing strategies and tactics, part of that is going to be a size up. And a size up isn't just talking on the radio and sounding cool. It's also looking around the big picture. See everything that you see everything, not thinking you see everything. And that's what Micah said that day. He thought he saw everything, but he didn't. He didn't stand back far enough back from the shingles. He ran through a portion of it. You know, you may have to estimate the stretch or the ingress point for your firefighters. You see there, that last point, like, maybe I'd go in the back door. Maybe I go in the side door, and hopefully I won't blab on too long, and we'll get on to a video from Stanton, Virginia, where they dictate exactly where they want the search, and that's exactly where a victim was. Recognizing any access issues or symptoms of problems we may encounter. Is there some weird fire behavior? Is there sound that, you know, if you think back, we were talking yesterday about the LA fire, where they had it in that CBD or hash oil factory. There was a distinct sound that happened just before the catastrophic fire behavior. And if you listen to some of the encounter or the accounts of that fire, that was one of the hints, like something's venting, something's going on. And we think big buildings that happens. Think about, you have a fire that's exterior on a house, comes from a grill. What is attached to that grill? Oh yeah, some propane. If you've ever seen one of those explode, it's not any less catastrophic than some of the bigger ones. It's just as scary and sometimes worse because you're not expecting it, right? And then think about your egress points for your occupants. Like if the breezeway is blocked, where do I VES? Where am I going to be able to get people out, or where may people start coming out as this fire progresses? Okay. Conditions, actions, needs. A lot of people use this, the CAN report, but I also add in needs 5 minutes from now. Like I work in an urban department, I can call for 265 people to come to a fire today. My issue is Pleasant Valley, I don't have 265 people unless I call Charlotte in my whole county. So the issue is I need to think early and quickly about, am I going to need more people 5 minutes from now? So call them now, because that 5 minutes is, then it's concurrent time, not additional time, right? So this is just an example of another, fire. This was a volunteer fire, but identifying the problems and needs straight off the bat from an incident command. And this is in the old fire POV. This was me in my car, pull up. It's not far from my house. Pull up, size up, give the engine company pretty specific instructions that are important and pertinent to what we were trying to accomplish.
Dispatch Pleasant Valley 2's on the scene with a one-story single-family dwelling, heavy smoke showing. This will be a working structure fire. Pleasant Valley 2's command.
10-4, Pleasant Valley 2.
Command the Indian Lane. Go ahead, 701. 701, check the hydrant quarter. You should be able to head jacket. Blow past, give room for the ladder. And I'm doing my 360 now. I'll give you command as soon as I get to 360. Got it. Dispatch 1431 will be en route. Command the 1001. A line through the front door to the back.
And that was just an indication to them, telling them where to stretch, because the fire was straight in there was that back bedroom there. It was a porch fire that extended into the structure there. This is a fire. I know this, you rarely get some stuff to get an indication of how fires progress. Well, this is early video from a fire we had in the same neighborhood that I just showed you. This was about 2 or 3 weeks prior. We burned 5 houses in there, and it wasn't for neglect of firefighting. It was because when they pulled up, they had a house and a half on fire, and then quickly thereafter, guess what? They had 4 to 5 houses on fire. So it was pretty interesting to see this video, and then the next slide you'll see the progression of it. But here's what they had. It was a windy day in the south. We like our Bermuda grass, and we like it dry and brown in the wintertime. So that makes for some really great fire behavior when you're talking about in a neighborhood that is built of single family, single story with vinyl siding. And then, because we're in the south, we don't want to spend money on mulch. We get the pine needles that fall out of the pine trees, which if you've ever set a Christmas tree on fire or watch your fire marshal do it, they burn a little bit, not too much, right? No, so we have highly flammable material in the side of the house, highly flammable around it. This was a windy day, somebody grilling out. Their grill blew over, started a fire that burned up 5 houses in this neighborhood, but this is just early video of it. So you see you have heavy involvement of the house, right? And if you notice, look at the wind and how it's carrying all that smoke. We're not just talking about a non-windy day. It's 15 to 20 mile an hour sustained winds. You see that front yard has already burned up and the fire's traveling around. You see, this is right after the company arrived. You see the firefighter in the front yard. They're trying to figure out, honestly, which house to go after first because it's kind of a mess. Okay, here's what it progressed to. Again, we're short staffed. They showed up with 4 people. We showed up with, I think, 3 or 4 after that. And after that, it was all volunteers. But you see, there's enough work for probably everybody on this webcast to get some of that day. Of course, I was at work at the city, so I just got to watch it on the live feed. But you look, we're isolating using the ladder. You got a fully involved house there, one that's already gone. Another house, like you get a house, you get a house, and you get a house. We ended up with about 3 alarms worth of companies. Every discharge on our engine was taken up. Every discharge on Indian Land's engine was taken up. You see the ladder there. That ladder was purchased for this neighborhood pretty much to isolate it. And you see there's plenty of work to be done, and we're not making a ton of progress yet. But this was about, I think, 5 minutes after that first video. So they stopped the spread that way, but it just continued on. Okay, so as an engine company, let's get into, what we need individually as companies. Engine companies, you got to have stretch proficiency. You got to access the seat of the fire, which sometimes is way harder. That's the difficulty, right? Operate the nozzle effectively. That comes with training. Getting in the nozzle forward class, getting in an exponential engine class by Brian, getting in a Dave McGrail high rise class. So that's the places you find those out. Get around some people who know how to flow some water and who can do it effectively. Using water with the patent water supply in mind. That's huge for you. Those of y'all that are on here that are rural. Like, I can't tell you to pull a 300 GPM, inch and 3/16 tip with no water supply and, a 500 gallon tank and it work out for you in a rural setting, because I have company concentration here in the city. But if you've got a 1,000 gallon tank, and that goes into, what we'll talk about later, of ensuring that when you spec your trucks, it's for you. It's not for the salesperson or for your mayor or anybody else. It's for your community that you protect. Initial tactical leadership. Sometimes those captains, everybody's got them. Those captains are firefighters on the fire ground that everybody looks to. When the feces has hit the oscillator, like, everybody looks to that captain. Where is this captain? Like, I need some advice here. Even the chiefs will look to that person, right? Recognize when initial resources aren't sufficient. We're really bad about that. And sometimes, right, we don't want to say, hey, we got our bottoms kicked. We want to say, well, we got this. We don't need to call our mutual aid. Well, sometimes you need to, and it just is what it is, right? Getting your water supply set up, a second water supply. One of my best chiefs I ever worked for said, if you have a second alarm, you better have a second water supply. That was his defining factor. And a lot of times it may depend on, we had a fire not long ago here on the west side of town. It's in an apartment complex with a well-known, not good water supply. The first in company knew that, but they knew they could supply 2 inch and 3/4 off that initial line. And we had fire through the roof. So then they backed it up with lay in from this good hydrant that's on the city side, not behind the water meter. And now we have 2 good hydrants, and we were able to have a good water supply for our 2 inch and 3/4 that came off first, while setting up for 5 minutes from now. If those 1 and 3/4 didn't work, then we can go defensive with our aerial and get, thousands of gallons of water, right? Doing a 360 size up. And I like to teach, when I'm the engine company officer, of course, first in, I'm going to do a 360. If I'm second in, I'm doing a 360, because in our system, and that includes Pleasant Valley, our system, the first in is always looking, they're doing the command piece. So they're not inside with the firefighters. So the second one, if I just dump inside without doing a 360, nobody that's inside that building has seen the outside of that building in a 360 manner. So that, again, taking that step back as an officer and looking and saying, all right, this is where we need to take this line to, right? Give the engine simplicity. Complexity breeds issues, right? Complex problems mean sometimes complex answers, but the more I can simplify my answers to complex problems, makes it better for everybody, right? Have one deployment method. If you're a Minuteman department, do a Minuteman. If you're a flat load, flat load. If you're triple fold, stay triple fold, but you're not going to have a 400-foot triple fold. Like, that's not going to work. So you need to justify why you're doing what you're doing, okay? And that's some of the stuff we've got to think about from even a command perspective at a chief level. Like, what is our department set up to do with our staffing? Like, what lines? I was out there in Missouri teaching this week, talking about pulling long lines, and there was like 7 people out of 45 in the class that had more than 3-person staffing. Well, you can't teach 4-person staffing for long lines if you don't have 4 people. Like, it's a worthless class. So you've got to think about that when you go talk to people about how you load your hose, or how the problems you have in your area. This is, Cornelius Fire. They're north of us, a bunch of city folks volunteer there, but they have lake houses and things. So they have a long 2-inch line. Because they have advanced fires on the lake with poor water supplies at times. Like, they have to adapt to that, and they have to do that for their department, right? Make it that linear decision-making model. That's really big, and that consistent decision-making makes it easier on the folks on the back. It doesn't complicate things, okay? So an example, short staffing, like here's a perfect example of how you can be efficient with short staffing. So you can see there's no more than 2 people going to come out of that cab, because it's a commercial cab, right? We got a well-advanced fire. And I think, we'd all agree the best way is to hit it hard from the yard here. But if you watch this video, as he goes into it, he knocks it down, and then he goes straight in the front door to isolate it from the rest of the house. It looks like that's probably a carport or garage that's on fire. See the firefighter stretch? He's using the triple. Guess what? He deploys it well with 1 person, and he goes to work. And if you look at the timing on this versus some videos you watch, one person, one line, and I think I don't have the time in front of me. I think it's like 40 seconds. He's got a line with water on the fire. Like, that's better than some metropolitan departments. So all those folks who are like, oh, you work at a small department, you're not as good as I am. Man, I don't know. Like, this dude did pretty well compared to a lot of metro departments I've seen. When you watch some Statter 911 or YouTube videos, like, this is a very strong work, and with a goal in mind of, okay, we're going to knock it down. We're going to move the line by ourselves as much as we can, knock it down. And then later in this video, he goes in the front door as a second company arrives, and he has his 2 in, 2 out, all that. So understand that, right? What can change? We talk about the first 5 minutes and how things go. This is an example of what came in as a brush fire. Look at the helmet cam. Look at the smoke. I don't see any smoke, do y'all? But when you see somebody running back to the truck and dropping a water can, it's probably not a good thing. So you look, again, dry. This was a windy day. You look, we got fire that's already impinged on part of the structure here. You got a mess. This is sped up, but you look, you got smoke interior because you hear the, and this is down. You'll see here in a second where this was, but that's fire. Now we got a building fire on top of our grass fire that's rapidly spreading. I think this day we had like 20, 25 mile an hour winds. So the fire was traveling faster than they could stop it. And even with good mutual aid response, it was difficult to stop it where it was. You have a rapidly spreading grass fire, and now we have a building fire remote from the other portion of the building that it caught on fire, in a multiple dwelling in a townhome setting. So those things changed all in the first 2 minutes. It went from nothing to something really, really quickly. Okay. So when you're talking about your initial truck company, you got to have aggressive search or ventilation depending on needs. And most of those go hand in hand, right? If I vent, I can search better. If I search, I can vent as I search. Recognizing the engine's needs, like I may need you to feed me a little slack as you're coming in or doing your primary. I may need you to locate the fire, pull some sealant as you're searching, or maybe I need you to vent the roof so that I can find the seat of the fire. All those things come into play, and truck officers typically, in a lot of departments, are the more experienced officers, the senior folks, the ones that people look to. Like, that's a perfect example. Like, hey, Captain Smith, what do you need? I need you to pull some sealant in here. I can't find a fire and it's hot, right? Truck officer leadership, having that strong tactical leadership is huge. And a 360 size up for all the truck functions. Where do we need ladders? Where do we need to put our aerial device? Where do we need VES? Where do we need to cut the hole? That's a big one that, some of the finest truck officers we have do a 360, just like I'm saying you should as an engine officer, because then they can say, all right, the fire's in that room. Our best spot's going to be here, as their folks are going up the ladder, right? They're going up the ladder to the roof to vent it, and they say, hey, cut the hole right here. They get up there as they've sounded the roof and establish where they want to do it. The company officer can then give them that. And that progressive thinking, like, where's this fire going and what do we need to do to isolate it, right? Thinking about proficient throws of ladders. This is a method our department uses pretty extensively. You can call it the suitcase carry, the high-low. I've heard it called a couple of different things, but it utilizes the person in the rear up high. And if you look, they're both carrying tools. We've got a Halligan and a hook. So if we're VESing, we've got all the tools we need. We've got the 28-foot ladder. That's what we carry. And it allows for pretty easy carry and throw because it's already up in the air and you're using momentum to your advantage. So things like that you got to find out in the field work. You got to go throw some ground ladders on houses under construction, or go throw some ground ladders at your training facility and practice different windows than the same windows you've practiced since recruit school. Put some pieces of tape up, put some different objectives. I want you to hit that sign this time. I want you to hit this sign. I want you to practice this. Do those kind of things in your department, right? Ladder complement. What do you carry? This is just an example of duo safety versus alkalite. I'm not a salesman for duo safety, but I can tell you if you're a 28-foot ladder person like we are down here pretty heavily because of our apartment needs, and as well, that'll get you to most of our second floor or two-story roofs. With the 28, it'll get us where we need to be. You're talking about a lot of weight there, right? We're talking about, a bunch of weight that I'm carrying around extra, and the ladder passes the same test. You got to think about your tank size. You got to think about what works in your area. A couple departments here have a 20-foot straight roofer, and it's because they have these long peaks in some of the mill houses they have around the Charlotte area, right? And you got to remember the majority of rescues on ladders are affected by ground ladders. They're not by the aerial device. The aerial one is really cool, really sexy, right? But the ground ladders is where the grunts do the work, and that's where we find them, right? And ground ladder sizes do matter. Think about this fire here and having a 28 versus a 24 on a fire like this. This is from DeKalb County. I know a lot of y'all, if you're watching this, you're eat up, so you probably have seen this video, but I always like to use it because, look, that firefighter took the time and discipline to say, hey, there's a kink in the hose. Well, they got a lot of stuff going on, right? There's a lot of kinks in the hose. Everybody's like, oh, my God, look at the hose stretch. All right, well, I've got a legitimate entrapment on the second floor. Like, my hose deployment's probably not going to be A+, number one. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on. We mask up here, right? Quick mask up, which, again, in the 4-hour class, we talk about that and affecting that. But make sure that you're practicing masking up, because right now is not the time to say, hold on, ma'am, I can't mask up in less than 30 seconds. It takes me 2 minutes. So look at the difference in the angles of the ladders. Think about if that ladder was 1 foot short, that lady wouldn't have been able to get off of there. You know, if we're throwing kids and things, that's not the time to go, oh, my 24 doesn't work. And, oh, we don't practice throwing ladders because we're on an engine, right? You got to think about that stuff, right? Ladder throws must be coordinated and efficient. You know, vent the simplest way, because a lot of you all on this webcast don't have the staffing that a lot of us do. You got to think about venting the simplest way and how to affect the fire the best, right? Coordinating with the engine, we got to coordinate the ventilation too. We can't just bust out every window and then be like, oh, you guys burn up the house. Well, that's because you guys gave it air, right? Efficient forcible entry, and that's a whole, that's usually a 15, 20-minute section in this class that we're not doing today, but efficient forcible entry. Like, you can't be half-assed at your forcible entry. You've got to be strong in that suit, and whether that's through the lock commercial, or if that is, you know, the old-fashioned saw, carriage bolts, all those kind of things go into all this, and you can't just make that up on the fire ground. Again, you, as a ladder company especially, and some of y'all are like, well, we don't have ladders. Well, that means, guess what? Your engine list just got longer, because you still have to throw ladders. You still have to force entry. You still have to get secondary means of egress. You're not pulling the ladder out of the cradle. But think about that. If you're in a department that has a ladder, get it out of the cradle. We were talking about it. The guys out there from Colorado, Lynch and Royal out of Colorado Springs, have done a bunch of training on forcible entry and stuff and ladders. And one of the things I love that they say is they never kick a door, even if they know they can kick through it. And it's because it's an opportunity for training. If I have a live building, even on a fire alarm, that, you know what, hey, it's a sunny day, I feel like putting a ladder up. I hadn't tested it today. It's an opportunity for you to live put up your ladder, live on a fire, put up your ladder, extend it up there, even if it's not needed. And we have quite a few drivers who do that on fires where, man, it's a room and contents, no big deal, but they still get the ladder out of the cradle as a practice point for them to figure out, did they position correctly for the outriggers? Did they position correctly for the turntable to reach where we're trying to get? Okay. Search priorities. You know, why do we search? Where do we search? Those are all things like you got to answer on the fly a lot of times. But so many of us get caught, and that includes me, in the go in the front door, left-hand wall search. Well, why don't we go in the back door if the fire's through? You know, if I'm knocking down fire going in the front door, I bet no human beings coming out that door. They probably went to the back door because they saw, hey, there's a wall of fire. I don't have turnout gear. I'm not coming out that way, right? What tool complement are you carrying? You know, do you carry like we did in recruit school, a 12-foot hook to do a primary search of a single family? No, we need to carry something that's portable. You know, some folks advocate for carrying a can and a Halligan so that they can fight fire if they get put in a bad spot. Like, hey, if that's what you do, that's perfect. You know, identify search priorities early, both at the IC and the company officer level. That company officer can control where the search is. And in that Stanton video, you see the incident commander says he gives very specific instructions where he wants searched. They search and they find a victim. Okay. Where would you be? If it was your house, I can promise you, you're going to find me at the end of a nozzle, because I'm going to lay out for my hydrant that's in my front yard and be fighting it with the nozzles I got in my garage. Like, everybody that's in my fire department knows if my house catches on fire, like, I'm going to be in there, right? If your daughter, son, dog's in there, where are you going to be? So if somebody says, hey, our dog's still in there and I don't know where my husband is, it's probably where the dog is. So where would an animal go? Where would a human go? Think about those kind of things. And most of y'all on this thing probably have a ton of experience with stuff. Like, you know where victims have been found in your department, and we're working on some stuff to get NIFers to track that. Like, where are they found? The second floor? Did we bring them down by a ladder? Were they conscious, unconscious? Those are all things that the firefighter rescue survey is doing a great job of capturing, but we're still not, you know, it's a voluntary reporting system. We need to make that where we can target our search based on statistics. We do everything else based on that. Let's start teaching our recruits why we search the way we do. Is the priority the search or the stretch? You know, there's a lot of people that have always said, and I know Andy said it, if you take the fire away, a lot of your problems go away, right? You know, if I fix the fire problem, I probably fix my search problem in a lot of ways. So think of it that way too. Knowing your apparatus, You know, what's the spread on your aerial? What's short jacking? What does manufacturers? You got to play with these things. You know, this is a residential street on that bottom. Well, the top picture was from an aerial rescue we had, where we had to back an aerial down a long dirt driveway, and you see all the junk that guy had in there, and we had to split the outriggers. You know, for those of you in metro departments, you probably do it every day, but in your rural setting that's becoming suburban, like we see in the South, where it was farmland and now it's 300 houses, like this, the bottom picture is our reality. One person parks on the road and the captain's trapped in that cab because I got to drop those outriggers straight down to get enough spread on the other side to be able to even put my aerial up to operate off that left side. So you've got to mess with that stuff and locate those hazards. Must do, we've already talked about some of this, but proficient forcible entry, protect your egress, protect your exposures, aggressive primary search, 360s. And when I say that, like I'm in a new position here at work as a safety officer. One of our charges is that pretty much to walk around and keep that 360 going, be continuous, if that makes sense. And that rapid fire attack, like we have to get on our fire attack. Okay. Protect what matters. This is a video out of West Metro that Brian so kindly shared with me. It's one of my favorite videos because it's one person with an 1.1 inch tip kicking some rear end. And also with that said, look at where he's attacking. This firefighter is attacking the means of egress and the means of ingress. Like we're hitting it hard from the yard because we have to. But if you notice at the end of the video, he's going straight up those stairs because that's where the people could be. And that's how the truckies and engine folks are going to go put the fire out and find the people. We've got to protect that stuff, right?
It's like the wind's starting to shift, man.
And at the end of that video, he takes it right up the stairs, right? Some more must-haves, a command presence. That's a difficulty. We're a young fire department in a lot of ways. You know, in the volunteers, you might have a 20-year-old firefighter who's now your chief because he's the only one that ran for it. But that person has to have some command presence. You got to have good leadership, proficient companies, and all this. You're like, oh my God, I'm never going to have a successful fire ground. We'll work on it. Make it better. You might not be 100% of these, but get better than you are today. Aggressive yet controlled actions and attitudes. Like if you come to a fire in Charlotte, a lot of our stronger officers, like the roof could be burned off. Like, oh man, the roof's burning above us. Hey, we probably ought to get some water on that. You don't hear a lot of screaming and yelling, but when you get to the younger officers, the culture's developed that's not acceptable. Make that your culture in your department, right? Having a water supply plan and forward-thinking officers also. That forward-thinking officers on a fire, and every one of you knows what I'm talking about. The folks who think a step ahead of where the fire is, like, Chief, have we thought about this? Well, crap, yeah, let's do that. So we got to have that too, okay? This one, the Stanton video I've talked about, I'm going to fast forward a little bit into it, but this is a single-family dwelling fire. You see the fire conditions upon arrival. You got a heavy fire on side A, right? You've got this right here, minute 40 in. This is the second arriving engine. It's actually a friend of mine walking up. You see him walk up to the incident commander right here. You hear that? Specific instructions. Look, right in the back door. Think about that. That tactical leadership, that's why this slide falls right after it. Like that company officer that was in command, it was ironic when I was teaching in Virginia this past year, he was in class and he said, that was actually me. Man, I gave him a high five right in the middle of class. Like he gave very specific instructions based on his tactical decisions he'd made as an incident commander of where he wanted the search done. Why? The engine company's working in that front room. They had 100% involvement of those two front rooms when they pulled up. Is there a viable human there? Probably not. We've seen it sometimes, but playing some odds there, probably not. Where are they going to be? Towards the back of the house where you saw smoke conditions were pretty bad, but survivable. That individual survived. You know, that was a golden star for the fire service. If you remember, it made the Today Show and everything else. It made us all look like heroes. You know, meanwhile, I've run like 10 medical calls the day that had happened. But everybody thinks you know, fire departments do that every day. That's a once in a career type thing. But that tactical leadership right there is huge for that company officer to say, search right here. This is why. He gave justification where he wanted it. And in his head, he had the strategy of why he wanted to do it that way. That company officer on the second due engine could have done the same thing. It's just that company officer that was the IC said, hey, I want it searched this way, because in his head, he knew this is why. Okay. So that tactical leadership is huge, you know, and it isn't just given, it's learned and earned. It takes years of experience, years of riding good companies, years of riding bad companies sometimes. And you got to earn it. Like, when do you become the go-to? It's not just by showing up for work every day, right? This is done at the station, not just on calls. Like, are you the one people come and ask you questions, or are you're the one that they're laughing at when you give the wrong answer, right? Showing through training, drills, general conversation, sometimes coffee talk around the kitchen table. You can learn a lot about your fire department, about the people you work with, their frame of mind. I know that some of the folks that used to work with me at the firehouse were better than others at certain things. So if I knew that, I'm not going to hand the saw to the guy who's my worst saw guy. But I don't learn that for just saying, hey, Kurt, are you a good saw guy? Because who's going to say no? We've got to get out and understand that, right? Vision and consistency. Consistency and skill acquisition is as important as the skills themselves. You've got to do, and one of the finest people who's done this is Aaron Fields. He does an incredible job of skill acquisition because he teaches, you know, it's a crawl, walk, run model, right? You start out, you learn this, you learn that, and then you learn the skills more effectively. You use the way the human mind works. You excite the senses to get those skills there. You can't just be like, all right, we're going to go flow 2.5 and move it today. Okay, cool, Cap, but when I get my ass beat, I'm never going to want to do it again, right? I need to make sure that I'm consistent in the way that I do that. And that's where there's people who are better at it than you may be. So you find those people, you locate those people, you have them detailed out to your station, you have them do a work sub at your station, you have them work overtime. Somehow you get those people to where they can be in a position to help you with skill acquisition, and it works out for you and your company, and most of all, the citizens we serve. You must have a goal, and it's got to be a moving target. Like, we're the best company, we want to be better. Or we're the worst company, I want to be better than worse. You know, I want to be a little bit better than we were yesterday. That should be a moving target every day, right? Be careful to not wear out your welcome. One of the best classes I sat in, it made me happy. Todd Edwards from Atlanta said, man, if you're the guy training at 3 p.m. every day and you're at a busy house, like, people are either going to kill you or want to kill you. And it's the truth. You can't, you know, I've worked at busy houses. Like, the morning was our training time and the afternoon was whatever you want to do. If you want to work out, if you want to lay down for a little bit, like, you have to do that, because if I come to work and you're miserable at home because you got a young kid at home, but we trained all afternoon and you couldn't, you know, catch up from sleep from the last shift, like, you're not going to like me no matter how good of an officer I am. So don't wear your welcome out. Find that happy medium in your culture, with your company, with your people. Don't just watch it on the YouTube and be like, all right, I'm going to train like Jonah does, because that's not going to work in your department. And trust me, I tried to train like some people do and it didn't work. You have to find that happy medium. You have to find that culture in your area, and not be, as I say, the guy with the backpack and napalm. Like, oh, well, I don't like those guys, they're lazy. All right, well, how do we make them less lazy instead of just complaining about them? Be part of the solution, not the problem, right? Be kind, coachable from all people, and accept criticism. If your folks be like, hey, Cap, we can't train this much anymore. Don't be the guy who's like, well, I'm the captain. Well, why not, guys? And one of the things that I learned in a good course I took was having a start, stop, continue model, feedback model. What do you want to start doing? What do you want to stop doing? And what do we continue doing? And using that from the ground up. So in other words, your firefighter's giving you that feedback, Captain, we need to start eating at 6:00 p.m. We need to stop, you know, eating like crap, and we need to continue training all morning, which may cause us to eat lunch late, or whatever it is. Like, even the simple stuff, use that model, that start, stop, continue model will help you out enormously. Preparation, you know, again, practice makes perfect. Varying obstacles to change it. You can find out your own limitations. Like, you can learn your area. It builds family. Like, these conversations, you see firefighter McCormick there, Doug, one of my favorite folks that I've worked with. He was my senior guy almost the whole time I was an officer. And this is Doug talking about hose. And if you talk to Doug, like, you would think, like, all he talks about is hockey and Tim Hortons and, you know, whatever Canadians talk about, Canada Day, all those things that they talk about. Well, Doug loved the job and kept me in check because he was not as eat up as I am. But we found that medium between the two of us where he would keep me in line as an officer and I would build skills as a company officer for him to be better as a firefighter, you know, to be a better driver. You know, he promoted a driver out of my company. And in the picture up top, that's Mindy. She was a rookie at the time. Teaching her the culture of our fire department, it's okay to care. Like she came detailed out and she said, Captain Smith, can we go out and train? And Doug, of course, was like, oh my God, we're going to train. But he went out and taught her without me really doing anything. And this was one of our problematic neighborhoods, funny truck position and those kind of things. So, you know, you can find out your own limitations. We found an apparatus design problem in our department because we went out and stretched 2.5. So got to talking to some of the other EDUP officers. And here we are redesigning our truck because our 2.5 would not deploy effectively. That's not found anywhere but in the drill field or out in public. This interaction here was one of the best ones. We had a citizen come out and, you know, compliment us on Karen, and she thought firefighters just sat around until fire calls happened. And we explained to her that, you know, the reason why we came to their house is because we were better than the neighbor and fire company, and, you know, made a joke out of it. But it ended with a call to a city council person. I get a call from my battalion chief about city council calling our deputy chief. And I'm like, oh Lord, what did I say? And just complimenting the fire department. So that makes us all look good, right? So that's an important piece of this. Remember that when you get out in public, you're representing that patch and yourself. You know, you gain a reputation there too. How it should go. This is a video some of y'all may have seen. It's of our Engine 18. For those of you who know some folks from our department, you know, one of the nozzle forward cadre, Jim Squateri, works with us. This is his company. He's actually the one that stretches. But I think it shows the culture of our department, and it's, I always say I have the best fire department. I don't care what any of y'all in this webinar think, like we're better than you. You know why? Because it's my department. You should have that level of pride in your department. And if it's not the best, what are you doing to make it better is the attitude you need to have. But this is, you know, showcase of what a company can look like. This is engine and ladder 18 arriving to a single family dwelling. Hopefully the volume would be loud enough you can hear the talk in the back between the firefighters on the back. There's no interaction from the front. You know, the company officer trusts those folks. And that day it was a firefighter 2 riding, but the captain who normally rides in that spot, he wouldn't be telling them what to do because he trusts them. They've done it on the drill ground. They've done it behind the station and discussing. So.
I got the stretch, boss. You got it? Yeah. All right. Yep. Yeah, it's a long stretch.
You hear him discuss on the stretch? That's what the engine company should be doing, pulling up, right? Good working fire, right?
26, into the circle,
You see, we're moving with a purpose. See, room and contents, good working fire, right? You see the lights, so the ladder's pulling up behind them. You see good stretch, efficient stretch out, right? Slow and deliberate, but not slow at all, right? Slow is fast. When I say slow and deliberate, I mean, and we're going to get water. Look, he's calling for water already. We're ready to go. See the truck company going for the search, right? Here comes the truck chauffeur with a roofer. Get that up. It's where the hole needs to be. We're getting right around the fire, right? Got 2 going into search. The reason, and I know there was some discussion of it. You'll see that a firefighter is going to the roof up. The reason Jimmy ran back to the truck there is he's getting dressed to join him up there. So that guy's up there momentarily. There you look, you see the lines bleeding off. We're going inside. They forced the door. Look at that. And we're sitting at, sorry about that. We were sitting at about minute 15, minute 20 seconds, and we've got all that stuff going on. I'd say that's a pretty efficient group of folks who know their job. Some of the best folks we have on any of the shifts in our department. And it shows there with their abilities and efficiency. Look, you saw the engine company moving the line in. You also saw the ladder doing a little bit of line movement, because why not grab a little bit to help that engine put the fire out or hold it in check so it can increase our search efficiency and reliability, right? So in summary, which it's unbelievable, I'm actually going to be done right on time. So I know Bobby's going to be happy with that. But simplify everything to control the variables. Everybody needs input into equipment. You can't just have your equipment spec'd by a chief who doesn't ride the rig. Like, we've got to have ground up input. I got to be able to stretch my lines efficiently, right? Search is important. We know that. That's why we're there. The people are the most important thing we do. And the engine and truck, or engine and search team working together, is so important, because ventilation is important for both those objectives, right? Teach everyone what a size up is and means. And that's a struggle we have at my volunteer department. Sometimes we have officers working, sometimes we don't. But at least, and I in my full program, I have a couple size ups that probably aren't appropriate for a webcast. And if Bobby was in the room at FDIC, I might get in trouble. But, you know, there's a great one out of Chicago when the guy pulls up and he says, holy, and guess what? It gave a pretty accurate portrayal of what he was seeing when he pulled up. Teaching your young folks, even the newest member, we have a rookie book at my department kind of modeled after some stuff Kentland did that we liked because it puts them in a position where they have to give a size up in case that Saturday comes when Johnny Servansits yesterday pulls up to the station house to ride the seat because one driver's there and everybody else is gone on the lake. They can at least say the building's on fire. Like, it's on fire. I don't care if you tell me it's a 62.5 by 72.5 single family with brick veneer. Like, I need to know it's on fire or not. That's the biggest thing. So teach everybody a size up. And part of that is mentoring, teaching, what you learned, blending it into your culture, right? Coordinate the disciplines together. So don't just do engine training without the truck there. Don't just talk about flowing water without thinking about ventilation needs. Seek out training ideas, of course, FDIC, but think about a lot of the training that's in your area. Get some of your local training. Just come back from Missouri, revolutionary fire tactics. It was 106-degree heat index when we were out there. And guess how many people said, I'm not doing the next evolution? That's because that's what firefighters do, right? We adapt and overcome. We don't want to be the weak one, but we also know our limits. Well, you don't find your limits until you're out there doing it, right? You got to drill. And then one of the big things I always say is step away. Don't forget you got a family at home or somebody that cares about you outside the fire service. That's a huge piece of this that I say in all my classes because it's so easy. The fire service is a sponge. It'll suck the life right out of your life. So don't forget to every now and then step away, take some time with the family. Don't answer those phone calls. Don't go to that volley call in the middle of dinner. That don't go to every fire alarm. I'm glad to get in an argument with my wife about a fire CPR pin in, but running every CO call or everything at the volunteers, like at some point you do have to step away and enjoy some life outside the fire service, because that in the end makes you a better officer, better firefighter. Okay. I want you to remember this. This is one of my favorite quotes because it's happened to me. This is my life in the fire service. First, they ignore you. You're too new. They don't care. What does Jonah know? What is, I'm sure anybody on this webcast could say, well, they never listen to me. Well, how long you been on the job? Oh, a year and a half. Well, of course they're not going to listen to you, right? Then they laugh at you because then you're like the 7-year guy. And man, I went to FDIC this year. I heard these great guys talk. And they're like, you went to Indy for a week to spend a week with firemen? Like, what are you doing? Like, are you that stupid? Like, this is dumb. They laugh at you. Then they fight you. So you get in that 7 to 10 year range. And then you have a little clout. And you got a voice with somebody. And they're like, oh, no, he's an idiot. He wants to get promoted, or whatever they do, the chair snipers, the recliner snipers, right? They sit there and every idea you got, right? Sitting from the recliner, watching the hunting shows, not putting in the work you are to be a better firefighter. But then you get that voice with the right person. You show the work, you show the work ethic, and then you win. And everybody who's been in the fire service for any period of time that keeps a good attitude, because that fight you stage turns you into a sourpuss sometimes, turns you into that guy at the firehouse. Everybody's like, oh, he's just pissed because whatever. But when you win, you got to keep that attitude. That's the only way you're going to win, is to keep your head down, do the work, drill, be the company people look to. Be the one who designates where you're searching. So after the fire, when that company officer who nobody respects says, man, that was a great idea. Why'd you do that? You explain to them, and now what have they done? Gained education from you, and then they've gained respect. And some of the people that you might not think are the best firefighters, they just need some guidance sometimes. They need somebody to take them under their wing and say, hey, have you thought about this? This is why I did it this way. This is why we park our apparatus. This is why I don't always follow the blue line when I'm the third due engine, because sometimes when I show up the other way, the chief sees the front of my bumper first and gives me the coolest sign, right? Think about that. So when you win, don't gloat about it either. I always say this, like, I'm more of a Joe Montana fan than I am a Cam Newton fan. Not just because Joe Montana's Joe Montana, but think about a lot of the things that the way they acted on the field. Like, if you score a touchdown, like you're supposed to, you're a quarterback, right? Think about the Michael Jordan documentary. I think it was episode 7 was one of the best episodes I saw of that thing. And it was one of the best sports programs ever, but he talks about leadership. Every now and then people are not going to like you, but you know what? Michael Jordan had a lot of faults, but his goal in life was to win basketball games. And he did. And at times he lost friendships because of it. And he says it, and in that episode, he's literally talking about how hard it was to do what he did and how he knew he screwed up some stuff interpersonally with people. And he literally, he breaks down emotionally, says, all right, we're done. Because it's sometimes hard to be that point person. You're going to lose friends over it. But in the end, what's our goal as a fire service? Is to help people, right? To help make it better than when we got there. Okay, so here's my contact stuff. We'll answer a few questions here in a second, but that's my email. I've got my little Hornet Fire training thing, got a Facebook page, you know, see you at FDIC 2021, pandemic free, we hope, but I'll see you there and see you around different places. But thank you for your time today, and I'll stop screen sharing so we can answer a couple questions.
Well, Jonah, we're back. I can't join you visually because I'm muted by the, Tammy, if you're going to re-engage us. So thank you, Mrs. Producer. That was very kind of you. So that was fantastic. And I love your ending there. It reminds me of the old saying, when you make officer, if you want to be liked, get a dog. You know, it's that's not the goal. That's not what we're supposed to be aiming for. We're there to help people train and get better. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation. We got quite a few questions coming in, and remember, you can still ask a question. You got that ask a question box, and there's a lot of stuff in there. We covered a lot about size up, covered a lot about, you know, pre-designated roles. We covered a lot about the differences between different jobs. So let's start it off right now, Jonah, with this 2 in 2 out question. We did a whole hour on that a week ago about 2 in 2 out. So, you know, we could wax poetic on this one. But so 2 in 2 out, the question goes, you know, as a 2-man initial crew, how does 2 in 2 out factor into your size up, smoke, no smoke, you know, investigate only? That's an interesting question, right? If you're rolling up and you're staffed with 2, you know, how do you deal with 2 in 2 out? Well, there's a dozen answers to it, but I'll let you start, Jonah.
So one of the things, and I'll address it from 4-person staffing first, because I think it's important to remember this for those who are like, well, I don't have 2-person staff. Okay, we'll get to that piece. But for 4, one of the things we started doing as a department, a lot of the eat up officers, especially those engine officers that were really eat up, we left a person at the tailboard to stretch. We left a person. So if nothing was showing them, there was nothing, like the last apartment fire I had on my company, 2 of us went in, we opened a door, building's on fire, chief, upgrade it, working fire, portable 3, stretch. And everybody's like, how did you tell him? Where was he? Leave a person there if you need to. And when you're talking from a 2-person staffing, like 2 in 2 out, remember, is our, even with 4-person staffing in North Carolina, at least, our OSHA does not even see that as acceptable to go 2 in 2 out. So you're never gonna, you know, meet that. It depends on your life hazard, those kind of things there with 2 in 2 out. I think when you're 2-person staff, that driver has to get so much more involved. They may be stretching back to you if you go investigate in a house and okay, so you got a multiple dwelling like we had on my last fire. The officer, so the only other person on the truck, may go into, you know, to investigate and may say, hey, I need a line in here, and meet that person at that front door. Probably time, you know, depending on your culture, would be getting the line to the front door, so that when that second company arrives, now I've got enough people to go make an interior attack. And, you know, it depends on your culture and your department. Some departments say, hey, there's a life hazard every time, but I'm not going to put Johnny serving since yesterday on the knob, you know, with 1 person. That's how we end up with line of duties, right? So we've got to be very careful in that line, but using that driver to be more involved in the stretch is going to be where your answer is there. And by the time that second dude gets there, now the line's laid out, its charge is ready to go. Now I've got enough people to go in to have, you know, to have my buddy system, to have my 2 in 2 out, to get in there and get to the fire. And you can isolate it with that 1 person inside as well. You know, shut the door.
And the long and short of it is, it's your local. It's a really local issue, right? And the answers are all over the place. So the most important to me when I give advice on this, and people are asking all the time, deal with it locally. And remember that standard, you can adopt it or not adopt it. It's not the, you know, 11th commandment or anything like that. It's a standard, and the authority having jurisdiction, you know, can modify it any way they want to or deal with it as they may. So, you know, in a lot of places, 2 people is all you're getting, you know, and you just gotta live with it. I mean, we live in the real world, and so deal with it locally. So you said something about size up, which I thought was important. And I think one of the easiest ways to do it, and people always, you know, wonder, how do you get more size up practice? About 25 years ago, we started doing size up practice in New Mexico, a buddy of mine, Ted Nee, and I, and all we used was flat out pictures that we imported fire pictures on. And that organization is still doing it to today. The same, drills every quarter, they go through a size up drill. Reason being is apparatus has changed, stretches have changed that they're using, they're using different loads in different places. So that's a piece of drill that should just be, I love it. And I think you can incorporate it in a million different ways: daily drill, quarterly company. And even when you're doing your rollouts, and you're doing your hands-on, physical measurable stuff, the size up ought to be in it. It shouldn't just be the stretch and everything else. The size up, if you're doing it on the drill tower, you could lay out a picture. So what are you doing in Charlotte to keep those size up skills?
So actually, I was gonna mention it, and now you cornered me with the question. We're working on a task book for our initial company officer. We have a company officer development we do. We do a chief officer development class, get you fire officer 1 and 2, and then the chief gets you 3. We do some internal stuff with that, run through scenarios. We actually just built I guess it was last year, built a scenario room where there's lights and sirens and crackling, and it's annoying and it's aggravating, but then they have breakout rooms within that room that allow you to see that masked view. And it's really good. I know Phoenix, Clay Fire Territory, a lot of places have these IC things. You need to put people in that seat to see it and to put them in that panic. And I tell you, one of the things I loved when I took chief officer development this past year was I'm in a room with a bunch of people I look up to, a bunch of people that are students with me that I'm friends with. And the worst place to be when you're sizing up a fire or giving commands is in front of a bunch of your friends, because they're going to be brutally honest. Even if they're just giving you a hard time, you don't know. So we're doing that. We're also working on a company officer. So post promotion, we're looking at doing a 2-week, we'll call it a field training program, where you'd have a task book that must be completed, with your mentor to ensure that you get, we have a computer like most people. Well, you can make or break a relationship with the driver by not being able to operate the computer. Like, the apartment's on the left, no, it's on the right, and engine 2 just beat us. So we've seen some of those gaps and kind of training that out using that task book. And part of it's going to be identifying a size up and initial company operations. Okay, on this fire, what would you say the commands are? And having that reviewed by a group of peers to say, yes, water supply is important on this fire, but it's important to get quick water on this fire. Using those, the fire academy style metrics of, this JPR to be an officer. Like, we've got to do that. But then let's get into actually, like you said, Chief Halton, like actually being an officer. We got to make them actually be officers, not just certified.
And I love the task book idea. That's right out of the Wildland. The Wildland folks have been doing that since their inception, basically, ever since Manning, the original Manning came up with the Wildland coordinating group. They've been using task books, which just makes wonderful sense. And it's also a great way, when you're talking about doing evals on your folks, you can use the task book, because you can say, hey, Joe, this is great, or Jill, this is great. You had a little problem here with the, pulling the load here, and then you worked on it. It looks like it's really worked out for you. You came up with some great ideas for packing and unpacking. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think is spectacular. And the only way, you beat yourself up a lot, because it is always tough to be that guy, the FDIC guy, the folks the guy or gal who always has their nose in the books or the magazines, always wants to get out and play with stuff. But even the folks who give you a hard time, really, they want to be there. It's just obligatory to give you a hard time. I mean, a lot of folks don't understand that about our culture, is that it really is true. If we're not messing with you, we don't like you. Like, you messed with me about 11 times during that presentation, and I'm going to make your life a living hell in April when you get to FDIC. So here's another really good question. I like this because it's got to do with hydraulics, and I think it's important. So it's a volunteer department, basically 3-person cabs, which is really kind of not that all that unusual. They usually lay in on working fires due to a 500-gallon tank on certain of second engine. If you can lay in and you got plugs, in my opinion, that's great. Lots of times in volunteer jobs, there ain't no plug. So, so that's a whole nother opinion. But go ahead, give your thoughts on laying in, not laying in, 500 gallons.
So what I'd say is, you didn't give me the budget of the place, so I'd say buy a new truck.
Whoa.
Get out here on the virtual show floor and find you a 1,000-gallon tank. But
and no joking, if you didn't see the 2 rigs that were on this morning, it's archived.
Yeah.
Go check it out, because man, did they spec those? Did you watch that this morning, Jonah? They spec
there.
those rigs are spec'd. If I had to spec a rig today, man, I was like, yeah, like I'm a car guy. And every now and then I'll see somebody who did their rig right, their ride right. And I'm like, I'm looking at those rigs and like, I had rig envy. I was like upset all morning. I was like, yeah, you get jealous. You're not supposed to get jealous. Yeah. Check out those. It's archived. Everybody can go back. Those rigs this morning were unbelievable. So go ahead about this 500 gallons.
With a blank check and, as an assistant chief, you give me a blank check. Okay, you get a bigger tank. But I think, the challenge there is with 500 gallons. Remember, 500 gallons is still 500 gallons though. And I don't know your area. I don't know, we could go through this fire. I think it's better to be looking at it than for it, especially with water supply, because if I can't, once the truck's parked, it's not moving back to the hydrant. So I can't just like go, hand jack 3,000 feet of 5-inch if I need it. However, I'd remind you, look into there's a lot of instructors out there that have put in, it's how many gallons of water is in your 1 3/4 when it's charged. Figure out to assign, go time your tank. Figure out, like, we can put a room and contents fire out in this neighborhood with this lay because it's dynamic. And one of the things we struggle with here in Charlotte, everybody thinks Charlotte, huge, big city. Well, you let a thunderstorm roll through and you got a company that's 25 minutes away being first in on the south side of town, like they're going to lay in, but we'd never lay in on a normal day because our company concentration's tight. So you got to think of it that way too. It depends on the fire, where it is, is it close to the mutual aid or not? But like I said, it better be looking at it than for it. That's just like with resources. The other thing is, what does it do in terms of your operations? Does it block out your truck company? Do you catch a mailbox and leave it dry so that we can relay pump it? We do a lot of reversing out here in Charlotte because then we can double and triple tap hydrants. We can maximize our flow. It gives me redundancy. So that's kind of, again, it goes, and I'm not dodging it and being political. It's hard to answer without knowing what fire you're talking about. But again, as a culture, that's got to be in your head. Like I said in one of the slides, like a water supply plan is a must. Whether it's we always lay in or we might lay in, you got to have that consistent through your department because, if I come to your department and everybody lays in except for C shift and I forget it's C shift and I pull up, I'm like, uh-oh, no water supply. And it's a narrow road. I can't just back down the road real fast and get you a water supply. So keep it consistent amongst your department and work with those other engine companies and see, there are folks out there who use a booster backup instead of laying lines. Like, does that work in your department? I know it doesn't work in either one of mine. If I need more than my volunteers, we have 1,000 here in the city. We have 500. If I need more than that, I need a patent water supply. I need a hydrant. And sometimes I need more than that hydrant can offer too. So it just depends. But again, I would err on the side of caution. Like, if you don't know when the engine's getting there, probably, and it's more than a can job, we probably ought to lay a line. It's not going to hurt anybody.
And when I teach can classes, it's amazing how much fire you can put out with a can. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about it, one of the things years ago, we roll out no plugs. It's a tank water fire, and a young firefighter is kind of hitting it, stopping. And I said, what are you doing, kid? And he said, Chief, I'm conserving water. And I said, look, son, if 500 gallons fast doesn't do the trick, 500 slow ain't the answer. So, just
one of my favorite quotes about water and water supply it comes from Brian, and he said it. We were doing it may have been this very class at FDIC, and he says there's 500 gallon fires and there's 5,000 gallon fires, and a lot of the 500 gallon fires or 5,000 gallon fires were 500 gallon fires where we didn't put it on fast enough.
That's exactly right.
And it's exactly true. You think about the fires you've been to where you pull an 1 3/4 because it's easy. We do it every day. And if we'd have pulled 2.5, we'd have punched it right in the throat. Instead, we played patty cakes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this got worse, and it's a surprise. So
and one of the things we learned early on too, and I kind of flipped out there on you. One of the things I learned early on is that you only have so much time on the fire ground to really get to it fast, and you just have to move. You got to make a decision. You got to move. You got to go with it. And so, if you're waiting, like Tommy Brennan said, if you're waiting for somebody else to bring you water, you've already made a mistake. You know what I mean? So, do what you have. So listen, I know I want to respect your time. I know you're pulling triple duty here. You're
COVID.
Yeah, COVID. So yeah, right. Yeah. Amen. So hey, listen, this afternoon on Facebook Live, Chris McClune's going to be doing a wrap up. If you want to talk to some of the folks from the Rev Group, they're available to chat with you right now. If you watch a couple of those archived videos, you got some questions, please sit down with them and have a conversation. Look at some of the apparatus they've got available. If you're looking for apparatus, you're in the right place this week, the next 5 weeks, because these folks are, the old expression, they're stacking them deep and selling them cheap. It's a buyer's market. So I'm just teasing my Rev friends, but they've got some of the best apparatus out there with some really great innovations. Please join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and check out this industrial pumper. I'm a huge fan of industrial firefighting techniques. The 3D firefighting, it's really important. And trust me, every nozzle ever made is put out a fire somewhere. So if you're one of these people who thinks that the only nozzle you should ever use is a smooth bore, great, good for you. I can't wait to meet you at your 4th wedding, because if you're doing something the same way every time, you're a fool. So this is a great opportunity for you to see some of the innovations they're doing in industrial firefighting and some of the stuff they're using there. 3D firefighting, some of this high flow capacity. It's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity to really get an insight into some stuff on some rigs you may not be able to, see today. It's 10 a.m. It's at 10 a.m. Tomorrow morning, and it's just that check your calendar. You'll get alerts. So you're going to see some great stuff tomorrow. The archive stuff is up there, and then there's giveaways, there's prizes. I mean, if your friends haven't registered, get registered. This is some really good stuff. Next week we've got Tony Carroll coming on. He's got an amazing presentation. Jonah's going to be with me at FDIC, so please, make sure you mark your calendars for that. Jonah will be out there, and we're really looking forward to seeing you there. Just want to say thank you again to our friends from Rev. Rev is 5 of the biggest manufacturers out there, and they're doing some really incredible stuff. And they're just great people. This morning, they answered every question we had. They're just neat people. This is a neat opportunity, and I can't thank them enough. I can't thank you enough for spending your time with us today. This is just an amazing platform, amazing opportunity. Jonah, I love you. I am gonna ride you like a rented mule next time we're together. So you shall not escape my wrath, because us old people do that. Remember, I'm Irish. We hold grudges for centuries. So I love you. I love everybody out there. Rev, you're just the best. We really appreciate you. Check in with Chris at 3 p.m. on Facebook Live, and I'll see you tomorrow morning when we walk around 2 more incredible rigs. So see you all there. Thanks.